One would think that things couldn't get much worse for poor Job, but when we look at chapter 2, our assumption that Satan has accepted defeat and moved on is annulled. We see that Satan is still bent on proving Job unfaithful. Job can really provide us with an illustration of faith even for today's modern Christian. We need to be honest with ourselves and ask the question, if the events that happened to Job happened to me, would I be reverent in my suffering or fall away from the faith? The answer to that question will show the value of God in your life and whether you're serving Him for who He is or for selfish reasons. Back to the text now. Let's look at the first section in chapter 2.
Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said to Satan, "From where do you come?" Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking back and forth on it." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil? And still he holds fast to his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him without cause." So Satan answered the Lord and said, "Skin for skin. Yes, all that a man has he will give for his life. But stretch out your hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will surely curse you to your face." And the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, he is in your hand, but spare his life."
The initial meeting is repeated. Why? Why would Satan expose himself to more of the atmosphere of his defeat? It's clear that he had in his mind to further challenge Job's faith. Double or nothing, he may have thought. If I can win the second battle, the first will be as good as mine anyway. It's also apparent, though, that Satan intends for God not to let up on Job that easily. It can be easy to go through a tough challenge and worship God immediately afterwards, thinking that He will restore all that He has taken away. But the true test comes in perseverance and long-suffering. Let's get back to Jesus' soil analogy. But the seed in the good soil, these are the ones who have heard the word in an honest and good heart, and hold it fast, and bear fruit with perseverance. Luke 8, verse 15. The ancient Greek word translated to perseverance in the New American Standard Bible is hupomone, which literally means under remaining, which we could use in the sense of endurance. So what Jesus is pointing out to us is that good soil bears fruit through the endurance of trials. This reminds me of what Peter said. "In your salvation you greatly rejoice, even though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been distressed by various trials, so that the proof of your faith, being more precious than gold, which is perishable, even though tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ." 1 Peter 1 verse 6-7. Again, God is glorified when we come out of our trials victoriously. Satan knows that going through trials for an extended amount of time could be a sure way to break Job's confidence in God and curse him to the point of his own death. But again, God boasts about his servant Job's value for him, knowing that yet another opportunity is presenting itself for him to get glory for himself through his unwavering servant. God elaborates on his past victory by pointing out that Job still holds on to his integrity, despite Satan's intention against him and his maker. But Satan twists the apparent victory and suggests that Job is such an abhorrent lover of himself that he cares more for his own comfort and health than his trust in God. He once again asks permission to have a go at Job for the purpose of proving that if Job had his body subjected to pain and discomfort, he would change his tune and curse God. Let's for a moment look at what it means in this context to curse God. In cursing God, Job would in effect be turning away from the faith he has in God. He'd be falling away from his believed possessed grace and accept a life without God or accountability. Not only that, but Job would also be saying in his actions that God does not know what he is doing, that his sovereign goodness is ill-intentioned, and that God is not 100% good in everything he does. Putting ourselves in Job's shoes after losing everything we have, including our children, it may seem like an easy thing to shun God and disown him as sovereign and good. But this would only manifest a weak faith and conclude that we view our possessions and providence and family in higher regard than we do God. Jesus said, "If anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake, he is the one who will save it. For what is a man profited if he gains the whole world and loses or forfeits himself? Luke 9, verse 23-25. By cursing God, Job would be saying that his material loss and personal suffering was not worth the privilege of being a child of God. Sow skin for skin, a proverb of which the origin is not fully known, in this context means physical damage. Satan intends to inflict severe devastation on Job's own person, hoping that that will be the final straw for Job's convictions, and that he will then deny God's good absolute control. God gives this permission, conceding to the fact that Job's allegiance to him is superficial if it cannot stand the test of physical discomfort.
So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with painful boils from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. And he took for himself a potsherd with which to scrape himself while he sat in the midst of the ashes. Then his wife said to him, "Do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die." But he said to her, "You speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we indeed accept good from God, and shall we not accept adversity?" In all this, Job did not sin with his lips.
Imagine being covered with boils from head to toe. Constant pain robbing you of sleep and any form of peace. Not only was Job's anguish over his children being manifest in the fact that he was still sitting in the midst of the ashes, but now he was to suffer severe pain and discomfort at the hands of Satan, who had received permission from God to pick out his choice of disease with which to inflict Job. The potsherd mentioned in the NKJV is most likely a broken piece of pottery used to scratch at the sores. No doubt, if Job was covered from head to toe with the boils, his hands and fingers too were swollen and sore, giving us a glimpse into the immense throbbing pain Job was forced to endure. Then, a curious thing happens. The one person Job has not lost, the one person who, of all people, should have played a supporting role amidst his suffering, gives him some very, very bad advice. Essentially, she says, "Are you still believing in this God of yours? Do you still think he's so great after all of these troubles he's put you through? Forget God, curse him, and put an end to your suffering." This remark may suggest that Job's wife was under the tempting influence of Satan. How horrible it must have been to get such advice from Job's supporting partner. He would have been foolish to listen to his wife in this regard. Ralph Venning says of Job's wife the following:
When Job was sorely afflicted, his wife said, "Curse God and die," which was a cursed speech. But Job said, "Thou speakest like one of the foolish women." Men and women never speak more foolishly than when they speak against God. They are fools who quarrel with God and charge him with folly.
At this point, everything truly was pointing him in the direction of blasphemy and rejection of his God. I like the fact that Job doesn't call his wife foolish, but instead tells her that she is speaking as a woman who is foolish, suggesting that she is under a temporary sway of foolishness as opposed to a permanent predisposition of stupidity. And then one of my favorite remarks flows from Job's lips. Shall we indeed accept good from God, and shall we not accept adversity? The word adversity, which is literally evil, as translated in the King James Version, is actually better translated adversity in this context because the evil in question was allowed by God, not directly inflicted by him. We should, however, remember that Satan incited God to stretch out his hand against Job, reminding us that God is sovereign and always in control. It was he who gave Satan the permission in the first place. Remember that Satan, though rebellious against God as God, is still God's servant, whether he likes it or not. Nothing Satan does can ever thwart the purposes of God. This may be difficult to understand from a human perspective, but our place as humans in this fallen world is to trust God wholeheartedly as completely good and completely in control.
Now when Job's 3 friends heard of all this adversity that had come upon him, they came each one from his own place, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. And they made an appointment together to come to sympathize with him and comfort him. When they lifted up their eyes at a distance and did not recognize him, they raised their voices and wept. And each of them tore his robe, and they threw dust over their heads toward the sky. Then they sat down on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights, with no one speaking a word to him, for they saw that his pain was very great.
This comes across to me as a wonderful turn in the sorrowful story so far. Job has at least 3 friends who will come and offer him their sympathy. Now, without going too much into the personalities of each one, since we will discover that as we go along, let's meet these 3 men, since they are important characters in the rest of the book. Eliphaz the Temanite came from a region called Teman, later on referred to as Edom, seen in Genesis 36. Adam would become a neighbor and enemy of Israel later on in Israel's history. King Herod, who reigned during the time of Jesus, was an Edomite. Of course, that would be many centuries later, and so during the time Job was on earth, Eliphaz was a flawed yet mostly comforting friend. Bildad the Shuhite was from the line of Shua, a descendant of Abraham from his marriage to Keturah, as we see in Genesis 25 verse 1. It's interesting to note that Bildad was of Abrahamic descent, since he is one of the more negative of the 3 friends of Job, as we will see later on in chapter 8. Zophar the Naamathite was a Gentile from the region which would later on be designated Canaan, the future promised land of the Jews. Zophar only speaks twice to Job, but like Bildad is quite negative in his supposed comfort. Now that we've met Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, let's see how they respond to the events so far. In an admirable act of deep sympathy, all 3 of them, coming at the same time after meeting together, notice from a distance how terrible their friend looks, and they weep. Whoever said that real men don't cry? The text says that they raised their voices and wept. I can imagine them wailing and sobbing at the thought of their friends suffering so greatly. The term in Hebrew means that they were lamenting, a word used to name the book written by Jeremiah when Israel was carried away captive to Babylon. When his friends arrive at his house, they sit with Job and share in his pain. I love that they remained silent for a whole week because of the greatness of their friend's suffering. Sometimes silence is the best form of comfort for a friend who is going through a rough time. Words like, "I know what you're going through," or "I understand," are sometimes better replaced with compassionate, empathetic silence. Even these minor lessons can be learned from the wonderful Word of God. Let's move on to chapter 3 to see what other valuable truths are hidden in the treasure chest of the book of Job. Be sure to catch the next video rendition of this commentary as we begin to look at the long dialogue section between these friends. Till then, God bless.